Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing fantastic. We are continuing our reading. Sahih Muslim, that's what I'm saying. Alright. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, let's continue. Alright. 78. Al-Hasan al-Hulwani narrated to me, he said, I heard Afan say, I heard Abu Awana say, no hadith reached me from Al-Hasan, but I bring it to Aban bin Abi Ayyash, and he would recite it for me. Suwaid bin Sa'id narrated to me. He said, Ali bin Mushir narrated to us. Hamza az-Zayyat and I heard approximately 1,000 hadith from Aban bin Abi Ayyash. Ali said, I met Hamza and he told me that he saw the Prophet, peace be upon him, in a dream. And he told him what he had heard from Aban. And he did not recognize anything except a few things, 5 or 6. Interesting, see that? Zakaria bin Adid said, Abu Ishaq al-Fazari said to me, write down from Baqiya whatever he narrates from those who are known. And do not write down what he narrates from those who are not known. And do not write down anything that Ishmael bin Ayyash narrated from those who are known, nor those who are not known. Oh snap. I like it in these books when it tells you like, oh, this person, they're weak, you don't listen to their hadiths, or like watch out their chains, Ishaq bin Ibrahim al-Hanzali narrated to me. He said, I heard some of the companions of Abdullah say, Ibn al-Mubarak said, what a good man Baqiya would be, were it not that he changes names into nicknames and nicknames into names. That's what, for a long time he used to narrate to us from Abu Sa'id al-Wuhazi. Then we would read that was Abdul Qudus. Okay, so I see, because you can get confused, right? But it's kind of funny, right? Someone's making up a bunch of names. You're like, can you just give me the real name, man? Come on now, Ahmad bin Yusuf al-Azdi narrated to me. He said, I heard Abdul Razak say, I never saw Ibn al-Mubarak state bluntly that anyone was a liar, except in the case of Abdul Qudus. I heard him say, he is a liar. Abdullah bin Abdul Rahman ad-Darimi narrated to me. He said, I heard Abu Nuaym say, and he mentioned Al-Muwalla bin Urfan. He said, Abu Wa'il narrated to us, Ibn Masud came out to us at the battle of Siffin. Abu Nuaym said, do you think that he was resurrected after death? Well, I mean, not to the day of accounting, right? Interesting question. It was narrated that Affan bin Muslim said, we were with Ishmael bin Ulay, and a man narrated a report from another man. I said, but this one is not reliable. The man said, you are backbiting about him. Ishmael said, he's not backbiting. Rather, he judged that he is not reliable. So some backbiting is like, no, you're just not the one. You're just not the one. Bashir bin Umar said, I asked Malik bin Anas about Muhammad bin Abdul Rahman, who narrated from Sa'id bin al-Musayyab. He said, he is not trustworthy. I asked Malik bin Anas about Abu al-Hurarith. He said, he is not trustworthy. I asked him about Shuba, from whom Ibn Abi Dihib narrated. He said, he is not trustworthy. I asked him about Salih, the freed slave of At-Tawama. He said, he is not trustworthy. I asked him about Haram bin Uthman. He said, he is not trustworthy. I asked about Malik, about these 5. He said, they are not trustworthy in their ahadith. I asked him about another man whose name I have forgotten, and he said, have you seen him in my books? I said, no. He said, if he were trustworthy, you would have seen him in my books. Oh, that's funny. That's a good one. Al-Fadl bin Salh narrated to me, he said. Yahya bin Ma'in narrated to me. Hajjaj narrated to us. Ibn Abi Dahib narrated to us from Shurabil bin Sa'id, and he was accused. Oh, I guess accused of like not being that great. Interesting. Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Khuzhad narrated to me, he said, I heard Abu Ishaq at Talkani say, I heard Ibn al-Mubarak say, if I had been given the choice between entering paradise and meeting Abdullah bin Muharrir, I would have chosen to meet him than enter paradise. But when I did see him, I realized that the camel dung was dearer to me than him. From paradise to camel dung. That's funny. Oh, that's a good one. Al-Fadl bin Sahel narrated to me. Walid bin Saleh narrated to us. Ubaidullah bin Amr said, Zayd, meaning Ibn Abi Unaysa, said, do not accept any reports from my brother. Jeez. Oh, I like this. They're just like, no, don't even deal with him. Ahmad bin Ibrahim ad-Dawraki narrated to me. He said, Abdus Salam al-Wabisi told me. Abdullah bin Jafar al-Raqi narrated to me that Ubaidullah bin Amr said, Yahya bin Abi Unayyasa was a liar. Okay, so I like putting the ones of like, they just call right out. Like, no, he was not true. And like, think how valuable that is to have that in the hadith books themselves. Not just to include only the valid ones, but to show you like there's disputation, because the more you hear them say this, the more you're cautious and like, oh wow, you know. Ahmad bin Ibrahim narrated to me, he said, Sulaiman bin Harb narrated to me that Hamad bin Zayd said, mention of Farqad was made in the presence of Ayub, and he said, Farqad is not a person of hadith. Okay, so Farqad is not a person of hadith. Abdur Rahman bin Bashir al-Abdi narrated to me, he said, I heard Yahya bin Sa'id al-Qatan say, when mention was made in his presence of Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Ubaid bin Umair al-Laythi, that he was very weak in narration, it was said to Yahya, weaker than Yaqub bin Atta? He said, yes. Then he said, I did not think that anyone would narrate from Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Ubaid bin Umair. Oh boy, so that person, they're not happy with him. Clearly. Wow. Bashir bin Hakam narrated to me, he said, I heard Yahya bin Sa'id al-Qatan describe Hakim bin Jubair, Abdul Allah, and Yahya bin Musa bin Dinar as weak in narration. He said, his hadith is nothing. And he classed Musa bin Dihkan and Isa bin Abi Isa al-Madani as weak. And I heard Al-Hasan bin Isa say, Ibn al-Mubarak said to me, when you come to Jarir, write down all of his knowledge, except for reports from 3 people. Do not write down from him reports from Ubaidah bin Mutib, Asari bin Ishmael, and Muhammad bin Salim. Muslim said, and there is much that is similar to what we have mentioned of the words of people of knowledge concerning accused narrators of hadith, and the faults in their reports, for which we have no room to write about here. What we have mentioned is sufficient for those who are wise and understand the way of mudahithin in discussing and explaining such matters. The reason why they oblige themselves to expose the faults of the narrators of hadith and transmitters of reports, and to pass judgments on them when asked to, is due to the seriousness of the matter. I mean, yeah, right? It's a serious matter. You gotta know what you're talking about. You can't just write down anything. Reports on matters of religion speak of lawful and unlawful commands and prohibitions, exhortation and warning. If the narrator is not sincere and honest, and the one who knows of his faults hears it, and narrates it without explaining his faults to one who is unaware of them, then he will be sinning if he does that, betraying the common folk of the Muslims. For he cannot be certain that some of those who hear those reports will not follow and accept them, or some of them, although they or most of them are lies that have no basis. Moreover, the authentic reports which are narrated from trustworthy narrators and the people who are accepted are so great in number, and there is no need to quote from the narrators that are not trustworthy and not accepted. Interesting. This is really laying this out for us. I mean, if they know that those people are not trustworthy and then they still want to narrate from them, it'd be like, hey, what are you doing? Wake up. I think that the reason why most of the people of this type narrate this weak hadith and chains of unknown narrators and accept them after knowing of their faults is to show how much knowledge of hadith they have before the masses. And so that it will be said, how many ahadith so-and-so has memorized and recorded. Whoever follows such a path with knowledge, then he has no share of true knowledge, and it is more befitting that he should be called ignorant rather than knowledgeable. But hold on though, shouldn't you memorize who is weak in hadith so that like you can remember, like, oh, I remember that they were weak, they said this but it was not correct? Because clearly these narrators have pointed out that you should know the names of the chains that should not be followed. So if you can memorize those for this, okay, the intention then, right? Because if the intention is just to have it memorized and not to utilize it and apply it for correcting or for educational purposes and rectifying things, then it would be wrong, right? Interesting. Yes. Yes. Chapter 6. The correctness of using muwanan ahadith as proof when it can be proven that the narrators met one another and there is no mudalas among them. Okay, so let's see. Some of our contemporaries, who are claimed to have knowledge of hadith, have spoken about the examination of change and explained what is authentic and what is unsound according to their view. And if we were to avoid discussing how bad their methods and views are, that would be a good idea and the right thing to do, because ignorant, a corrupt view is the best way to kill it off and make the one who said it less known. Interesting. Interesting approach. It is better so that the ignorant will not know anything about them. Interesting. So what if you just... So the ignorant won't know, but the wise will know? Let's see. But because we fear the consequences, and because the ignorant may be deceived by their innovations and may rush to believe their mistakes and flawed arguments, we decided to expose their flawed views and refute their opinions as much as is appropriate. That is better for the people and will bring better results if Allah wills. Fair point. Fair point. Because even in regular classes, like if you're going to go through like a logic statement, someone said something illogical, you go about debunking it, right? Like, okay, it still makes sense. And then the students of knowledge learn and they're like, okay, right? But I think there's a balance, right? You don't want to propagate their fake names to give them credibility, but you also want to add to the knowledge base of people knowing they're not the best people to look at it. The claimants whose flawed arguments we mentioned at the beginning of our discussion claim that any hadith in which the chain says so-and-so narrated from and so-and-so, and it is well established that they were contemporaries who could have met one another, and that the narrator could have heard it directly from the one from whom he narrated it, or he could have spoken with him directly. We have no proof that he heard from him. We have not found anything in any report to show that they met at all or spoke to one another. Then it cannot be authentic unless he has some proof that they met during their lifetime, once or more, or spoke to one another, or there is some report which shows that they met once in their lifetimes or more. So look at that. Look how we're like learning here about how they go about getting in the information from the trustworthy ones for the hadiths. Highly educational. I mean, there's more to it, but because the video is getting at that 14-minute mark, we'll pause it here. Wow. So in Bukhari, we're learning all about the chains. It's amazing. And The one about the paradise and camel dung. I mean, come on, that's just hilarious.